Who's your hero? Do you have one? Or do you wish you did have one? Let me tell you a story. The young man was 17 years old, captain of the football team, incredibly good shape. One night, he got up after a football game, fell down in the hallway getting a glass of water, couldn't get back up. His mom and dad got up, tried to get him to walk, couldn't walk. They took him to the local hospital, couldn't diagnose what was going on. So they packed him up and drove him 100 miles down the road to the next most modern hospital in the rural America area they lived. And they wait for a year. No diagnosis comes for a year, anxiously waiting to find out what's wrong with their son. Doctors entered the room with the news one day, "Son, you're never going to be able to walk again. Your legs and your arms are going to start to atrophy. No hope. You're going to be a sage of society. You're going to be a quadriplegic. You're probably going to be a handout person. We suggest welfare. No life. By the way, you're going to be paralyzed at least from the waist down, if not your arms and legs. We don't believe you're going to be able to have any kids, and we're doubtful that anyone would probably want to marry you, in essence. No future." Finally, they tell him he has polio. The doctors had explained to him that polio was like a fast-moving cancer that we had no cure for, and the cancer would eventually overtake and eat up your muscle groups in your body. The year was 1944. 9 years before Dr. Jonas Salks, the brilliant vaccination doctor, came up with a cure for polio in 1953. Knowing what he knew, how would you feel waiting a year to hear that news? How would it impact your future? What would you be thinking about if you were that young man at 17? Well, as Paul Harvey once said, now for the rest of the story. As it turns out, this young man would become a hero. He decided not to believe everything the doctors were telling him. He did not view handicapped the way they did. And so he decided to have a different mindset. As it turns out, a young candy striper was studying to become a nurse. She happened to be in the same hospital. She happened to find him very attractive and fell in love with him. However, she received some bad news at the same time. She was scrubbing up to become nurse ready with the soaps that they had at that time, and her hands were breaking out. So she couldn't actually become a nurse. Devastating news for her, devastating news for him. Maybe together they could make some good news. As it turns out, they decided they'd fallen in love and they could do something about it. They decided to get married. Both parents disapproved. Neither parent went to the wedding. The only people that believed in him at that time was her brother and his wife. This young man was trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life. Studies 11 years at night to become a certified public accountant at LaSalle Extension courses. For 25 years, works in a CPA firm. During those 25 years, not only is he working professionally, but miraculously, they become pregnant for the first time. And then 10 times in 15 years, they have kids. He becomes the mayor of the small town in rural America that they're part of. He gives back to society 3 terms of mayor, 2 terms of city commission for a 16-year window upon retirement. He was also on the President's Council for the Handicapped. That man was my dad, Al Stiff. His life mate was my mother, Vivian Stiff, who helped him in every way, shape, or form that you could imagine. Together, they made a life, and she was vital to him being my hero. In a way, she's my heroine, but it's hard to get both into one story. He's my hero, and I hope you have one. Now, the question becomes, how do you act when you're a hero? Wow, tough one, Dan. You know, he didn't have to act. He just was who he was. It wasn't about how he acted, it was about who he was as a man. And that character trait is hard to come by, but there's so many little stories I can tell about him that just impacted this little community in Bozeman, Montana we lived in. I'm one of 8 remaining children in the family, but most of his stories came out of little lessons in life that you learn from people that aren't the next president of the United States or aren't a famous rock star. They're people you're close to that maybe you don't even realize. I remember we went downtown and walked with him when he was mayor of the city, and he would usually have people saying, "Gee, Al, how you doing, etc., how you feeling?" And one day in particular, I was walking with him, and we were walking down the street, and I knew he was having a bad day, and one of his character traits was he never complained. And he kept telling people that when they asked how he was doing, he said, "I'm great, how are you doing?" And the conversation would turn towards them. And it started to really make me feel like, Dad, you're lying. I mean, you're not telling the truth about how you're feeling to these people. And so I didn't challenge my dad very often, but I asked him that day, why are you telling people you feel fine when you're not feeling good at all? And he said to me, he said, Dan, people don't want to hear that I'm not feeling good. He said, I find it much easier to make it about them and how they're doing. I'm going to get through this. I remember one day he was in a mayor meeting for some developers in the city of Bozeman, Montana. My dad actually had a building named after him, the Al Stiff Professional Building, which is really cool. But this contractor developer was trying to run over the city of Bozeman. He was bullying people, honestly. And here's my dad in a wheelchair. We used to call him Ironsides, you know, and he's in this wheelchair as the mayor. He's got the gavel going. This guy was getting out of order, and so my dad hit the gavel. And I'll never forget what he said to the man. He said, you might come into Bozeman and throw your weight around, etc., but he said, we've been really kind to you so far and how you've approached us. But he said, don't ever mistake kindness for weakness, because you're not going to come in here and roll us over. And you know what? That's why I respected him, and that's why I loved him. And one other final small story. When he was on his deathbed, he died in 1999, my brother Tony was with him, and Tony was at such a spot where Dad was hurting so much. And Tony said, Dad, this is such a lose-lose right now. And Dad said, Tony, I've been winning all my life. From a wheelchair, 10 kids, and an impact on the community that all of us would wish for in our lives. So I think the challenge with who we are and how we act and how we carry on our life is, what are the character traits that people have that we would like to emulate, that make them our heroes? My dad's was honesty, character, diligence, hard work ethic. Please hear this. He wasn't perfect. He had his angry moments. He had his moments where he wanted to send us to third floor so he could paddle us because we'd done something wrong. Probably our fault, not his. And, you know, he didn't tell us that he loved us until really late in life, when he started to realize, when he lost 2 of his sons, that this is important to say, I love you. Did I ever question whether he loved me or not? No. I never questioned that. Neither did my sibs. My question to you today is, who's your hero? Do you know? Do you care? Because I think the way we need to get through life is to understand the people that we want to emulate and be like, and the people that we would hold up as the people in our lives that we love, because they show us how to live life. And he was one for me. Who's your hero? Are you a hero for someone else?